Hi, and welcome to Change and Organizing in the Community. This is LS 606 for the Nonprofit Leadership Masters. So in this course, we're going to be using the Organizational Change book, right, from Causey, Desga, and Ingalls. And so we're going to go through this chapter by chapter, and then we'll have some assignments along the way. And so every chapter is going to start out with a chapter overview like this, and it's going to talk about what's going to be in that chapter. It's a good place to look for the important points that you should be getting out of the chapter. So the goal of this book is develop your ability to initiate and manage change. So this book is all about changes in organizations, and that's what we'll be talking about through this course. Right? Why change, right? There's lots of environmental factors, social change, demographics, lots of technology changes, smartphones, things on the internet, apps, all those kind of things. Political changes, changes in laws, change in the local politics, right? All kinds of economic forces, whether they're international, domestic, where the economy's up, the economy's down, tax breaks, all those kind of things factor into change. So organizations are constantly in this environment where there's change outside the organization, and often the organization will have to respond to those changes by having their own internal changes. Right, so we're going to be real soon here talking about 4 types of organizational changes: the attuning, adapting, reorienting, and recreating. And then we'll talk about different change roles and difficulties in change. We're going to talk about a lot in this course about difficulties in change and how you can really struggle trying to get people to change inside of an organization. Okay. So when we define organizational change, right, it's the intentional and planned alteration of organizational components to improve organizational effectiveness, right? And that's not the accidental stuff. That's not an organization say it's changed because it is, I don't know, it's just spun itself into chaos, or the train has left the rails, or any other analogy you might want to use. Those are certainly changes, but they're not what we refer to as organizational changes because they weren't intentional. They might have been catastrophic, they might have been important, but they certainly weren't intentional, at least usually not. And then we talk about organizational effectiveness in here. In management class, we make a distinction between effective and efficient, right? Efficient is you do more with less, right? So we consider that doing things the right way. Effectiveness is doing the right things. So are you working on the correct things? So in my 20-year history in industry, I've seen people work very hard and do a very fine job on something that just didn't matter, right? That would be an example of good efficiency but bad effectiveness, right? So they worked very, very hard on, I don't know, back in engineering school, we always talked about if you didn't change your products and you got very efficient at making buggy whips, right, instead of switching over to making cars, you'd be the best, buggy whip manufacturer in the country. But at that point, who cares? It's totally irrelevant, and your organization goes out of business. So when we talk about effectiveness, you got to not just do things the right way, but you got to do the right things, and sometimes that's not so obvious. Organizational components. So we'll talk about different organizations, the components inside an organization, how we have to change them. Things like the mission and vision statements, their overall strategy, goals to support that strategy, the structure, how the organization is designed, the org chart, all those kind of things. Processes and systems, inside the organization, technology being used, and of course the people. All this is about the people in the organization, and often it's easy to change, say, the structure of an organization or a mission statement. Yeah, not so easy changing the people, particularly when they've been there a long time and they're kind of dug in. So we'll talk a lot in here about the issues and difficulties of organizational changes and things we can do to overcome them. The knowing-doing gap, right? It's the change capabilities become a core managerial competency, which means knowing how to do it is one thing, doing it is another. So this book and this course is geared towards the doing part. We're working on the knowing, and then we're going to work on the doing. So we're going to try to do both. It doesn't do you a lot of good to know how to do something if you can't, in fact, be able to pull that off. Right, so down here we see the bottom, concepts and theories are not enough, right? We need to become effective agents of change, and that's what we're going to work on here, and we'll see how you do with that. Right? Kind of makes this course interesting, I think. So the orientation is book. This is sort of a caution of don't get bogged down in the details or don't be distracted by the details. So the story of 2 stonecutters. First one was asked what he was doing, said I'm shaping the stone to fit in the wall, and the second one said I'm building a cathedral. Right? So Focus on the cathedral. Don't focus on, you got to get the stone right, you got to get the details right, but keep in mind the big picture and what's going on with the cathedral. Right, so those things are, we're going to do lots of details, lots of issues in this class, right, and it's certainly easy to get distracted. So what are sort of the hot topics these days in this organizational change? And it's certainly all the changes going on in society, the social, the technological, the political, the economic changes, all those kind of things are a big deal. And people who study change tell us one thing, that they can't predict the next big thing. They can't predict what changes are going to happen. But what they do know is change keep happening faster. So sometimes you're tired by change. You feel exhausted. You just want things to settle down for a while. And they might settle down for a little while, but don't think that's the end of it. Changes keep coming. The changes get more violent, then they get stronger, and they keep coming faster, right, with more rapidity. And if that bothers you, if you're not very good at that, I'm sorry to say it's going to keep getting worse instead of better. And so we're going to talk in here about how to deal with that and how to deal with the stress of that and how to help people manage those type things to lessen the impact, because we simply cannot make them go away. Right? The only way we can make them go away is not respond at all, in which case the organization itself will become obsolete, and then everything goes away, including the accomplishments of the organization and those people's jobs. So we're going to try to do our best to figure out a way to deal with it. All right, we're going to talk about 4 types of organizational change in here. We'll get to those real quickly here. And these 4 types are, we're going to look at whether the change is incremental on the left vertical column, or are they strategic? Right, so is it a small change, incremental, little improvements along the way, or is it a big shift in strategy? We're no longer going to do this whole thing we used to do anymore. Now we're going to do this new thing, and we need to get ready for that. Right, and then we're going to talk about anticipatory versus reactive. And of course, anticipatory is we see this thing coming. Right, things are changing. We're going to change in anticipation of that. We're going to try to get there before the change gets there, so we're ready for it. Versus reactive is we're going to not read the signs correctly, or read the signs correctly and hope we're wrong, and we're just going to sit there basically with our head in the sand and hope things go away. And when they don't, then we're going to have to, when it becomes patently obvious and we no longer can ignore it, then we're going to have to react, and we're going to have to do things quickly and maybe not so planned and so forth. And that requires a different type of organizational change. And to tell you the truth, I pretty much think I've been in all of these in my 20 years. So we'll take a look at this. All right, so we'll stop the video here. We like to break these videos into shorter segments if you need a break, if you need to do something. So most of them will be under 15 minutes in length. So we'll break the video here, and we'll have a second part of this video for chapter 1. See you in a minute.